for having us come and sharing a little bit, just like Pastor Matt said, to share a little bit about what God is doing. We're a couple that somehow got associated with it, but we're just instruments in God's hands. And really, everything you hear about this morning is because God is at work, and we give all the glory to Him. Ephesians 5:8 says, "You were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light." Children of light, niños de la luz, in Spanish, in English, is children of light. And this is the phrase that obviously we've named our organization after. But the reason why is because this is our heart and our passion for these boys that we work with. We work with street kids. I realize there are several out there that know us and have followed us for a long time, but I'm sure there are others that don't know us. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of orientation that when we say street kids, what we're talking about are kids that are living and surviving on the street, that have no other choice except for fending for themselves. They sleep under bridges, under park benches. They roam the streets. Their way of survival is stealing, manipulating, just whatever they have to do. But they're on their own. And the reasons why they're on the street are various, but I'll get to that a little bit later here. But our desire is to give these kids an opportunity to walk away from that life and step into a safe environment, which we offer by, we have a piece of property. I see already I'm straying from my notes here. When I think about that verse, Ephesians 5:8, that is not written for street kids per se. We are using it in this context, but this is us, and it's good to remember that we are those that were walking in darkness, and praise God, by His light, we've been brought into the light. And I also like this verse because it's not just saying you are now light in the Lord, but after that, it's walk as children of light. And that means we need to come to a place where we hear the truth, we believe the truth, and then we act in that truth. So what does that mean for us as believers to act and live out our faith and walk in this knowledge? There's a few different verses that are commonly used when it comes to missions and to children. Obviously, that's our passion. That's what we're going to be talking about today. James 1:27, many of you know the verse, says, "Pure and undefiled religion is caring for the orphan and the widow in their distress." And then the end part of that I think is important because I think a lot of people stop there, caring are looking out for the orphan and widow, depending on what version. But the end says, "and keeping oneself unstained from the world." And so there's the Ephesians 5:8 talks about these children, what their life, what our heart and passion is. But we put ourselves, whenever I talk about these kids and what we do on the mission field, I'd like to take that mirror and flip it around because all of this applies to us. It applies to our lives, and we are all, by the grace of God, walking in the light. And it's easy to look at the situation of these kids and go, wow, this is crazy, and I'll get into some of those. But it's important for us to stop and realize we are also the children that don't deserve the grace that God has bestowed upon us. So when I think about the children that we're talking to in these two passages, when we think about children, there's another passage. I had notes here. I don't know I'm so bad about following these notes. When Christ was talking to his disciples and the children were coming, and he said, referring to the kids, he goes, "Don't hinder them from coming." And he goes, "Because the kingdom belongs to one such as these. And unless you can come to the kingdom as a child, you can't enter the kingdom. These are crazy words. I didn't get that, didn't quote that verse exactly the way it is, but what does that mean then to be a child, stepping into and becoming a child? When we think of what children are, whether they're street kids or kids here, what defines a child between a child and an adult, normally the children are under the direction, the discipline, the care of an adult. And they become adults when they move into their independence and they start making decisions on their own and move forward. Now in the physical world, this is really echoey, is that me? In our everyday lives, we can look at we hope our own children, as they grow older, will move into independence, and that's natural and healthy. But in the spiritual realm, when we're talking about a relationship with God, Jesus reminds us, he goes, to step out on your own and move on your own is not the goal. It's to always be under the care and nurturing of your Father. And so as we're looking at the care for these children, that's exactly what we want to do, is be that model for them. So I'm trying to move into an illustration that I've used many times over the years, but to me it really depicts well what that relationship should be between us and our Father. In my youngest daughter, her name is Summer, when she was like 4 or 5 years old, she would always, whenever she'd hear me leaving the house, we had a little keychain hanging by the front door, and I'd grab my keys ready to leave the house. And when she heard those keys jingling, regardless of what part of the house we were in, she'd come running. She goes, "Daddy, where are you going?" I'm like, I'm going to go down to the grocery store. She goes, "Can I go?" And sometimes I'd say, "Yeah, sure, come on." So she'd come with me. Another day I'd grab the keys. "Daddy, where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going to go down and spend some time on the street with the boys. Can I go?" I'm like, "No, it's better if you stay here." "Okay." She'd walk away. Sorry, I'm here thinking, Mom. I use my hands too much when I talk. Oh, gosh. So she would always just come running up to me every single time, and it was the cutest thing until there was a time that we were living in Venezuela at the time, and we were getting ready to go back to California, where we're originally from, and spend a little time to visit with our church and to share what's going on. So if you've ever traveled with children, especially internationally, a lot of logistics. You're packing bags. You got your passports. You're looking at the time to be at the airport early. You got your bags and all this stuff. So I was telling Shannon, I'm going to start carrying some of the luggage down to the car. So I grabbed the keys, and sure enough, here comes Summer. "Daddy, where are you going?" I'm going, "Are you kidding? You don't know." She's a little girl. I said, "We're going to California." And she's like, "Can I go?" And I said, "Of course." And she just grabs my hand. She's ready to go. She didn't ask me, "What time do we have to be at the airport? Do you have the passports? What about the luggage? What time are we going to go? What are we going to do there?" Nothing. All she wanted, if my daddy's going, I'm good. That's all she needed. I think that's a beautiful illustration with our relationship to Christ. It's like what we need is to be connected, so connected. It's like trusting him so much that we're like, if you're there, I'm there. A lot of unknowns, a lot of things that I don't know, a lot of things I can't explain. But if my Father's there, I'm there, and I'm okay. I've heard a lot of people say faith is blind faith, but I just recently heard somebody say faith is not a lack of thinking, it's the highest form of thinking. And then they're talking about the heart. Pat and I were talking to Shannon this morning that faith speaks to the heart, doubt listens to the heart. And I think what that's saying is, in a situation like, say, Summer, she knows me. She knows her daddy. She knows he's been there, he's a protector, and he's going to take care of her. That's knowledge. She knows this. So she could, if she's listening like to herself, she's like, I don't know what to do. But that knowledge brings her to a place that goes, I know that my Father will take care of me. And we could rest in that. And so as we move forward and we start looking at these boys that we work with, No idea where I am on my notes, but that doesn't matter right now. We work with the fatherless, kids that have come from really difficult backgrounds, ones who are on the street because of a breakdown in the family. They didn't have that father figure, that mother, those parental guidance that they can gauge off of. In fact, quite the opposite. They live in an upside down world. When I talk about street kids and kind of try to look at the world from their perspective, what you get is kids that were, in a sense, raised or accustomed to an environment where adults are bad. Their parents are the reason they're on the street. They've been rejected, they've been abused, a lot of different scenarios that brought them to the point to where now they're having to live on their own on the street. The police, bad. Because the police are the ones that are trying to shoo them out of the area that they're beat, their neighborhood. The business people call the police because these street kids are menaces. They steal, they harass their clients. And so the police show up and they abuse these kids, sometimes beat them. They drive them away, trying to get them out of their area. Sometimes they'll arrest them, but because the government system isn't adequate, they end up letting them go after a day or two. And so in the kids' minds, police are bad, authority figures, parents are bad. What is good in their lives? Drugs. Why? Because drugs allow them to forget about their reality. It comforts them. It can keep them warm at night. Lying, that's a good thing to a street kid. Because lying is kind of one of the tools of the trade, or manipulation. Stealing, that's good. That's how they survive. That's how they get fed. And so you could see as you start walking down the way they look at the world, that is exactly opposite of what a normal child. And so when you're looking at, we need to become as children and we need to trust our Father. If they have no example of that, if they have no, I know I'm switching between spiritual and physical, but they kind of go hand in hand sometimes. So these boys don't have an understanding of what a true loving father is. And so because of that, we're adults going to the street and we're meeting with them, and there comes a time we could say, hey, why don't you guys come and join us to a place that you don't know, come under our authority, to where we're going to tell you when to eat, where to sleep, where you can go, where you can't go. These are all good things as parents in a healthy situation. And these kids are like, I don't know. Because you tell most people that we have a home for boys, and their thought is, wow, they must be so excited. They're like, oh man, I have a roof over my head, I have a bed, I have 3 square meals. It's not like that. In fact, there is one boy in South Sudan named Angelo that he was on the street, dirty. South Sudan is a very underdeveloped country. Just a real quick history. 2011, they got their independence from the north. There's a lot of civil war going on in South Sudan. And so, very, very undeveloped country. They had to, when they got their independence, the capital used to be in Khartoum in the north, so there was no capital in the south. So they found a city, Juba is now the capital of South Sudan, but totally underdeveloped. There's no running water, there's no electricity, there's very few paved roads. And so these kids are kind of victims of a lot of the turmoil that has happened in the country. I'm not going to go too much in the background right now of that. But it's to say, they're in the street and they're filthy. I've never seen the amount of kids in such a small area as like in the marketplace. And they'll come out of the woodwork and there'll be 15, 20 kids within one block walking into the marketplace. And as you talk to these kids, they just start multiplying. Well, amongst those kids was this boy named Angelo. So we brought him to our property. He stayed just a couple days. But when he got there, he started looking around, and he's like, there's no glue. Glue is what the boys use. They put it in a bottle, and the vapors in the bottle, they'll suck on the air out of the bottle. And those fumes are what they get high on. It's a very, very common drug for street kids worldwide. It's a crazy thing how this is common in every country that I've visited. And he was like, we can't have glue here? Like, nope, sorry. And they're like, and then you say, okay, it's your turn to, maybe do dishes or something. After a while, he's like, I'm out of here. They like their freedom. And so he took off, went back to the street, ran away. And this is common also for a lot of the kids that come, that adapting, they have learned to survive. It's not like working with an orphan who had their parents passed away and you take them from that situation right into a home. These are kids who have learned to survive. They're on the street and they have these skills and they put them to good use. And now to take them away from that and start putting rules and putting them in positions where there's authority figures over them, they react to that. And the end of Angelo's story is a month or two later, not the end, his story still continues, but the end of this story, our staff went back, and they do regular visits to the street and meet with the boys. Well, one of these visits, they said, hey, you guys need to go see Angelo. He's not doing good. They went and found him. It turns out he was extremely sick, almost unconscious with malaria and typhoid. This is back in the beginning of our times in South Sudan where we didn't have a vehicle yet, a four-wheeled vehicle. We had a motorcycle. So one of our big brothers and our director, Agostino, got him on this motorcycle and they took him to the hospital. And they sat with him. They worked with him, got him healthy, and when he was able, they brought him back to the property. Something changed in Angelo. He realized, okay, these guys aren't trying to hurt me. They're not trying to take advantage of me. And he has been with us ever since. That's about 10 years ago now, almost 10 years ago. And to see him today, he's 18 about right now, and tall, these boys, man, once you give them 3 square meals a day, and they love their sports, their football, which is soccer to us, I mean, they love playing their sports. Man, these guys are just big and healthy. He and another one of the boys, whose name is Nelson Mandela, yes, they had an opportunity to share on one of the local radio stations. And it was just such a beautiful thing. They shared their entire testimony and just proclaimed Christ's love and how Christ had saved them from the street, using Agostino and the love and compassion of those that are working in our ministry there. So in our ministry, because of their mindset when they come off the street, it's hard. You can see the problems or the challenge it could create for us as a ministry to help these boys get out of that mentality, move on. So what we do, we try to provide a home environment. We put these kids in a position or an environment where they have like a model family. Because the family is the reason, the breakdown of the family is the reason they're on the street, we try to provide for them a model so that when they get to the age and they move on, they have something to look back for and they go, that's what a healthy family is supposed to be. And so we set it up and we call, they live in family settings. We call each other brother, uncle, sister. We're trying to create, because in many cases, this is the only family these boys have. We put them not just in the family setting, but we try to do everything but use institutional terms. We don't have like dormitories and mess halls and stuff like this. We have a dinner table. The boys help prepare the food. They help wash the dishes. And like I said, it has challenges sometimes trying to get them to that point. But ultimately, there are boys that as you put them in an environment, still human. We're all human. We all have choice, and they have to understand and make those decisions on themselves. I want to tell you this morning about 2 boys. Let's see if I could get this thing to work here. Let's see. Sorry. I might be doing something wrong there. But there's two boys, Joan and Elias. Elias to this side, Joan to the other side. These two boys, they came to us. They were much younger than this at the time. I was trying to find another picture when they were little guys when they first came. Thank you. There's Joan about the age when he first came to us. Joan and Elias were like brothers. They had the same environment that we had created for them, a family environment. They went to school. They played sports together. So as they grew up together, they would eat at the same table, play the same sports, hearing the same message, same instructions, same love and attention given to them. As they got older, we have a program we have a life navigation. It's a life skills school. So when they got of age, they went to that school together. And it's a school that we really focus on their personal relationship with Christ, as well as a lot of practical skills just to be men and raise families and so on. A lot of classes. So we give them this instruction. We give it to both of them. These boys raised up together. After they graduated from our life skills school, it was about the same time we decided to open up a little coffee shop to give them some practical experience or something to write on a resume before they go out on their own. And so I asked these two guys if they want to help me build it. So we hired them, and we built this little coffee shop. And after the coffee shop was done, I said, "Do you guys want to work in the coffee shop?" Joanne's like, "I'm in." I'm like, "Cool." Elias, he's like, "I think I'm going to venture off on my own." That's okay. That's what we're hoping for them. But this is where, when we have examples in our own lives, we have a choice whether we're going to listen to the example set before us, and we're going to hear, believe, and act, or we're going to act with those principles and things that we have been taught and that we know and that we've come to understand, or are we going to decide to listen to our heart or to kind of try to figure it out on our own? Elias wanted to figure it out on his own. There's a saying in Spanish that says, "Dime con quien andas, te digo quién eres." And in English, what that translates to, tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you what kind of person you are. Elias made wrong choices. He started hanging out with the people that he thought were cool and kind of edgy. Fast forward a few months, it landed him in prison. But I will say that in Latin America, a lot of Latin countries, you're guilty until proven innocent. So he was in a situation that he was an accomplice, or he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, whatever. I won't get into the reasons, but he ended up in prison. He calls us up. And at the time, we were like, okay, this is a family. And he was needing, a lot of times in the prisons in Latin America, they don't give you food, or they don't give you enough food, so they depend on people on the outside. So he was asking for help. So I contacted all of his brothers, and I said, "Hey, Elias is in a tight spot." And it was really neat to see all of his brothers come together, those that were working at the coffee shop or whatever, and they all pitched in. And every month they helped him out. After a few months, dealing with lawyers, we were able to get him released. Elias didn't change his lifestyle. He didn't change his surroundings. He still thought he could do it. Okay, I messed up first. I'm not going to let that happen again. After probably 6 months, he landed back in prison again. All right, going, oh, man. And now he's calling me, and I'm like, "Elias, what?" And honestly, when he got out the first time, he didn't go back to his brothers and thank them for all their help. He was focused on his own world, and so he burned some of those bridges. And a lot of his brothers said, "I'm not helping you again. I've spent my hard-earned money to help you out, and you just threw it away." Over time, we worked. We finally got him released. And this time, I'm saying, "Elias, come. up to there. This is in the south of the country. I said, come up. I talked to one of his brothers who was already independent, and he was going to move in with him. He goes, yeah, I'll put him up for 3 months. And I said, come work at the coffee shop, and we're going to help you, kind of giving him some options. And he goes, okay. He got out, never made the trip. Next week, I've got to take care of some stuff. And time, and we realized he's not coming up here. Third time, ended up in prison. This is fresh. Last week, in prison, I tell you one thing about Elias, though. He is persistent. He's stubborn in that way. And he's also a very honest kid. When he was a young kid on the property, I could always go to Elias. Whenever there's a disagreement or something, we have mangoes, and the rule is you can't pull mangoes off the tree and eat them. You have to let one guy pick some, and then when we distribute them to everybody, so it's fair, and everyone gets the fruit. And I would be walking, and I'd see all these mango seeds, and I'm like, who's eating mangoes? Always. Elias would be like, Joanne, Francisco, me, and he would just say it the way it was, and he'd get disciplined like everyone else. But the third time, last week, literally, he's calling me again. He's like, John, you got to help me, and I'm like, Elias, how much help? How much does it help? At what point do you need to start stepping into your own responsibilities and so on? Like I said, this is fresh. This is last week. He's looking at possibly getting out again, giving him the same offer. But the choice is his. I can't make him come. If we have adolescents, we all know what that's like. We teach them, you instruct them in the way they should go, you pray for them, you give them the best environment they can, but ultimately they're making decisions. Sorry, I'm not flipping through my oops, too far. There's Elias. Okay, now on the flip side, Joanne, when I asked him, when we were finished with the construction of the coffee shop, hey, Joanne, do you want to come and work? He said, yeah, I'd love to. He started off washing dishes. He moved up to preparing the food. Eventually got into barista and cashier. So he moved up about as high as you can get in a small coffee shop. He doesn't get outside of manager or something. But he excelled in that. And he did awesome. And in that position, he learned a little bit of English because it's a very touristy area. And he had a good reputation in the community. Because in a small coffee shop like that, people come in all the time and they love talking to him and seeing his smiley face. He ended up moving into independence 100%. He had his own apartment. He lived on his own. He lived with some other guys, but eventually said, I kind of want my own space, and so he could afford his own space. And at the coffee shop, they get benefits, they get vacation pay. It's like a legit job. It's not just like some little thing to help him out. But he worked there for 4 years. And at the end of the 4 years, he came around, and he would always be visiting the ranch and stuff. We love that because it's his family, his only family he really has. Well, today, Joanne is there on the bottom, and these are his buddies at the ranch because now he's a big brother at the property. He works for us full-time now, and he lives there, and he's looking out. He has a real heart. I always call him the gentle giant. He's a big guy. He's big, but he's a super gentle soul. But when I look at the example of these boys and where they came from, I just reflect on our own children and our own walk. It's like many of us call ourselves believers, and we come to church and we get instruction, and we know how to live, and even youth, they're raised in Christian families, but ultimately it's not good enough just to sit in the pew and hear it. We need to put our faith into action. We need to hear it, believe it, and then act on it. Move and take those steps. And unless you're actively deciding what direction you're walking, society is going to take you in its own direction. We all know the influences that are out there. I want to say for our children, but it's on all of us. And if we're not determined to know what direction we're going and relying, just like Joanne did, just like Summer did, this is my dad, I know who he is, I know what I've been taught. I know what experiences I've had. I trust him. And I'm going to stand in that. I'm going to believe that. I'm going to lean into that. And the second we walk away from that, the second we decide to go, okay, you can't have a relationship with God and. We've all heard this before. And we want to. Our nature wants us to embrace some of these things, are parts of our lives that we haven't totally given up. God wants 100% of us. When I think of another boy, I'm crossing over a little bit in what I'm talking about in the main service, but our director right now in Venezuela is a boy named Douglas. Many of you know him. He's awesome. He has a wife and 4 kids. He was one of the first kids on the street that I met in Venezuela. I don't even know how many years ago that was. A long time ago. Because he's older and has his own family now. But Douglas also spent some time in prison after he left our care. And I can remember visiting him one time. And I went into that environment, and I can't even describe to you. If I had the time, I'm not going to get into the details, but it was a situation that I couldn't fathom. To live there day in and day out, and the deaths that take place in that prison, the violence, the filth, and just the ugliness and the pressure of being there. And I went there to encourage him, and I was at a loss of words. What do I say to this guy in this situation? And the only thing I came out at the end of the day, I go, Douglas, I cannot fathom the situation that you're living in. But one thing's for sure, God hasn't changed. And despite your situation, what God requires of us has not changed. What God wants of us, he wants us 100%. He wants us to lean into him and hold his hand and say, I'm yours. We can't start rationalizing with the things around us. Again, I'm overlapping a little bit in my message that's coming up next. So my encouragement to you guys, for all of us, is to remember who we are in Christ. Remember the lessons and the things that we learn here in church, in this environment, just like these street kids. All the instruction, all the food, the housing, the education is meaningless unless you actually are walking in that. And so not just as us as believers here today, but also in the instruction of our kids. And it's such an important part. If we are just hearing the word and believing it and not acting, it ends in religion. And then we just have these things. But we need to be living out our faith actively and being that light. Children of light. You were once in darkness, now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, walking in that light. And by doing that, we are shining that light. We will become the light and the salt in the world, and it'll bring people, it'll attract people. And that's our heart with these boys. And so, anyhow, to finish this time, I forget what time we have till, the question and answer, and I was going to see if Shannon wanted to come up and help me. If you have questions, anything as regarding our ministry, now's the time, because I don't think we're going to do this in the main service. So, and this thing, I don't think I'm wearing this thing right. It's dangling in my ear the whole time. Any questions? Yes. That's a good question. We have the same general model. Shannon, come on up here. As far as trying to create a family environment and having houses instead of dormitories and stuff like that. However, the cultures are slightly different, so there are minor differences, but the core of we focus a lot on the quality of care and not so much the quantity. We focus on their relationship with Christ and their spiritual walk. That's our emphasis more than, the education, the food, and everything else, which obviously we do. But, so our emphasis is in making disciples, basically. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Maybe it's some of the systems we have into play. We have some, some level systems that we do that encourage the kids, a lot of them have to do with age and then some with behavior, but as they show more responsibility or as they get older, they move into another level. So then that comes with more responsibilities and more privileges and things like that. So each country, we kind of all run with a lot of those same kind of things and the same sort of concept with whatever discipline or we call them consequences that we do and stuff like that. But culturally, yeah, the food's very different. In South Sudan, it's interesting because they like to cook outdoors. Like we've had a house we were renting for a while. They didn't even use the kitchen. They were outdoors with their fire, whatever. So now the new place we're building, we're adapting it to how they live, so it's not really like the other homes that we have, but so it's stuff like that.
Also, just to add on to that, we rented a place before we could afford one, and the bathrooms in the house, they just thought that was the most disgusting thing ever. You go to the bathroom in your house where you live and sleep, and so they use the outhouse outside. So when we finally bought our property, we're like, we got to think through this. What? So we had our director, Agostino, guide us as to, okay, the kitchen that we were using, like Shannon said, they use it as a storage room, not as a kitchen. They were cooking over a fire outside. So we have an outdoor, it's enclosed, but it's a fire kitchen, not in the house, and the bathrooms are separate. So it is adapting it to the different environments. Yeah. Yeah.
What about I'm sure there's little street girls.
That's a super common question we get all the time. Actually, the statistically, there are way fewer girls on the street than boys. In Latin America, there's reasons for that. It's girls are seen more as domestic help in the house, and so boys are strong, they take care, they're pushed out of the house a little faster to go beg on the street. A lot of times that first step to the street is because they're out there begging or stealing and supposedly bringing money back home. And when they don't come with the amount that the stepfather or boyfriend thinks they should come back, that's when they get beaten and pushed out. We have had girls periodically, and whenever we see girls on the street, we obviously attend to them. We had a girl in Venezuela, Claudiana, that we took in right away, and we ended up finding a family in the church that helped her, and we worked with that family. But not near the number of girls on the street as you see boys. It's just, and then we considered bringing both of them in, but these kids at these ages, they could be 10 years old and they've been abused sexually or sexually active. And so to mix that and that, no. Any other questions?
How many do you have in Venezuela? How many boys?
22, I believe, right now.
22. How many in the Dominican Republic?
15.
And how many in South Sudan?
The numbers changed because the boys come about, I'll say 24. Yeah. Yeah. Again, for us, our view is like we pray because there's a lot of kids on the street. We can't reach all of them, and we recognize that. And our heart and our prayer is, God, you send us the kids that you want us, and when they show up on our property, we pour into them like they're our own children, and we instruct them. And our prayer has always been, if there's one kid or there's 1,000 kids, we'll do our best to take care of them. When we first went to Venezuela, we thought we were going to work under an organization, but we ended up realizing there are no organizations helping these kids right now. And we're like, okay, who are we? We didn't have finances. We were new on the mission field. We could barely afford to be there ourselves. But our ultimate decision was like, God, if you could use us to help one child for eternity, that's worth our effort. And that's we kind of maintained that. It's like, God, one child at a time. And so we honestly try not to get into the numbers part of it. And obviously we want to reach as many as we can for the love of Christ. But we've also seen bringing the wrong kids into an environment. We actually visited an orphanage in the Dominican Republic where the director said, she goes, the street kids, she goes, you could have them. She goes, they're terrible. She goes, they come in, and when they leave, they take 4 kids with them. And she goes, it's detrimental. We don't want the street kids here. We have chosen, that is our focal, is the street kids, and that's what we try to focus on. But we want the kids that God wants there. Because if God has other plans for them, then, we don't want to be interfering in that either. Sorry, Shannon, I'm doing all the talking again. Shannon's answering the next question, so make it a hard one.
Well, I'll just comment first before you can answer the bigger part of that if you want. One thing that's kind of neat though about the home, because in Africa, yeah, they have different tribes and they don't necessarily get along. There's a lot of prejudice between the different tribes and all this kind of stuff. But it's really neat that at the home, that all kind of gets erased, you know, because we have boys from all different tribes. And so they're in one big family. And so it's kind of neat for them to not only be there for their own needs and, you know, what they need, but they're in a way they're getting educated that no matter what tribe we're from, you know, we're all the same and we can love each other the same and all that. So that's kind of a neat aspect.
But yeah, the cultural differences regarding tribal stuff, we've had some learning experiences. One of them, we received a call from our director there, and he goes, John, Ramadan, one of the boys' names, Ramadan ran away, and Joseph is in jail. And I'm like, what happened? He goes, well, they wrote some letters to these girls that they, you know, are kind of
Love letters.
love letters. And I was like, what were in these letters? Because the tribe, the family, came to our property, and they were ready to beat our boys. They were angry. And that's why one of them ran away. And we have one of our big brothers that is also an investigative police officer. So he took the other one to protect him and put him in jail because the family wanted to kill him. And we're like, what were in these letters? But you have to understand, in that environment, daughters are property. You pay a dowry if you want to get together and marry, take a daughter from a family. And these dowries are expensive. I was telling Pat, that maybe is why, I don't know if that's what you're referring to. But we have one of our big brothers who's still paying off the dowry of his father because it's passed down. And so these dowries are hefty. And so all of a sudden you have these kids, and they know they're off the street, the neighborhood, and now they're hitting on their little daughter. Their brothers and dads are like, what are you doing? It's like stealing. And so that was an eye-opener. And they actually came, and the chief of that tribe came and put a fine on our home of a cow and a goat. So we had to come up with the finances by selling one of our motorcycles to pay this penalty. But it's like things like this, we're learning, okay, that's a little different. Got to kind of shift with the culture and stuff. You had another question?
Yeah, who takes care of these kids in infancy, and at what age do they become street kids?
Okay, that varies in different situations, but for the typical scenario in Latin America, I'll start there, are these kids, they are raised by a single mother that gets together with a guy, she gets pregnant, she has a child. A lot of times that guy doesn't hang around, and now she has a child she needs to take care of, and so she meets another guy that's willing to come in and take care of her and her child. She gets pregnant again, has a child with him, and this kind of happens. The family grows on her side anyhow, and a lot of these boys that we have, they'll tell you they have 10 brothers or siblings, but from different fathers. And so what happens, it gets to a point where the new boyfriend or stepdad or whatever label comes in, and he's looking at all these kids that he's having to work hard to provide for that aren't his kids. And so it's easy to turn to abuse or to drive them out or to send the boys off to the street. And so that's kind of a transition. As the boys get older, we've had boys as young as 6, 7 years old. And the age that we normally take boys in are 8 to 15, because beyond 15, we feel like it's hard to have enough influence in their life in the short time they're with us before they're moving on. We've made exceptions on both ends. But yeah, in Sudan, it's a different scenario. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of tribal fighting and a lot of, because it's such a new country, there's 64 tribes all vying for the power of the country. And so there's alliances that are made. The opposition literally will come into a small village and they'll kill the men, they'll rape the women and girls, and they'll take the boys and train them to be child soldiers. And so the age group, I'm jumping all over.
So they come into these villages, like, if anyone can, they just flee and run. And so a lot of these boys have just been separated from their families. And it's actually, to me, even more tragic there because it's not necessarily that it was a bad home. They've been separated from their families, and a lot of them don't even know if their parents are still alive or where they are, and so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Oh, way in the back there, sorry. Again, different countries, a little different scenario. As far as financial help or backing, pretty much zero. They care about them in that they have a whole list of things that they want us to do.
Well, both in Venezuela and in the Dominican Republic, they have a child service, services that will take the kids if they find them on the street. But unfortunately, these homes, institutions are horrible. That's where like even more abuse happens, more sexual abuse happens. The kids will not get any education when they're in there. It's like, it's just one big room with a bunch of metal bunk beds and the abuse that happens there. And then it'll happen even between the boys because some of the boys have already been abused sexually. And so, yeah, they're in the Dominican Republic. They're supposed to be in there, hold them for 3 months while they find out the situation and investigate and then hopefully find them a home and stuff like this. We've had boys that have been in there for 3 years. And again, no schooling while they're in there, the abuse that happens. So by the time they come to us, we're having to hopefully work with them to heal all of this trauma that's occurred to them in these government facilities that are there to help, supposedly.
South Sudan is slightly different. It's such a new country. They've kind of given us a lot of free reign. And in fact, they're modeling now for other institutions what we do, because they said we weren't required to have a relationship after we take the kids in. It's like they're yours, take care of them. But we decided to do like a case file, and we go to the institution. We said, these are the boys that are with us, just so you're aware. And they looked at that and they're like, oh, this is awesome. Now they're making other institutions do that, which is it's accountability, making sure that these homes are healthy and safe homes. But yeah, I know the time's probably running out right now, so just last question here.
How is Angelo from the Dominican Republic that graduated high school?
He graduated high school. He got a sponsorship, or what do you call it, a beca?
Yeah, grant.
A grant, and he's now studying in Spain and going to university there. Yeah, that's one of our boys there.
Okay, Haslett will be around. We're gonna throw the sheets on this, another back for the sermon. Feel free to visit with them, visit with each other, and we'll be back after church in just a few minutes. You are dismissed.
Sorry, it was